Thank you. And Margot, did you happen to review the?
No, I didn't. I honestly didn't know I was supposed to.
Okay. Briggs, did you have a chance to review those?
Yes, I did, and I'm okay with the minutes as they stand.
Okay, and I reviewed them and will pay. Can somebody make a motion?
I know, I mean, I guess pass it.
Approve it,
Approve
okay.
it.
Those in favor? Margot, Briggs,
I,
and just me. I,
Until David comes.
until David comes, okay, very good. So our next point of review then is the SD 0224 hyphen 00012. It's the Gregory School entry improvements, and we do need to review that. I believe there's a presenter here.
Well, we're going to tag team. So I'm just going to start by again introducing myself as the head of school of Gregory School and share with you that this idea came about almost over 4 years ago, prior to the pandemic. And it was through much leadership from our board of trustees. And I'm so grateful that we have one of our trustees here this evening, Tom Q. We truly value being a part of the Old Fort Lowell neighborhood district, to the point that I know we've got students who recently were working side by side, some of your members, to do a cleanup. We have faculty members that are researching the old aqueduct that travails between our campus and the neighborhood directly to our south. We participated with the City of Tucson tree planting so that we could contribute to the planting of trees on the south side of our property. And so the impetus behind this front entrance project was really twofold. One, we wanted to be able for the entire city of Tucson and anyone driving up Craycroft Road to actually notice that there is a 45-year-old independent school and a distinguished independent school at that in this neighborhood. But secondly, we wanted to ensure that they also would notice that, oh, it sure looks like it's a part of the Old Fort Lowell neighborhood. And so we think there was no better person than our designer, who Tom Pugh actually enlisted to help us with that. And as a trustee and as the mover and shaker behind convincing Rory actually to work with us as a designer, I'm just going to let Tom share with you a little bit about Rory's background, and again, his view as a trustee and the importance of this project to the school. So thank you, Tom, for being here.
Well, thank you all. This looks like kind of neighborhood I would like to live in. In fact, I do. I moved to Tucson 51 years ago, and I found a house just north of St. Philip's Church. And I'm on the Catalina Foothills Association board, which has basically the same mission that you guys have out here. And I've had 3 children and 4 or 5 grandchildren who have gone to Gregory School, and still have 1 grandchild there who's 11 years old. And so when I got on the board and realized they wanted to make a real entrance to the school, kind of has a kind of slipshod entrance right now. They couldn't find a designer. They didn't know anybody, and I've in fact known Rory since he was a student at the U of A, because he was a student at the U of A when I moved to Tucson. So I've known him for that long, and I know his work. And our assignment was to definitely. His assignment was definitely to make an entrance to the school that was in keeping with Arizona, keeping with Tucson, and in keeping certainly with the Fort Lowell area. And so my opinion is that he's executed this, and I hope you guys agree. And I really appreciate being here and being able to say something to the support of the school and Rory. My friend Rory.
Well, but maybe to continue to reinforce maybe this relationship to maybe Tucson, and this neighborhood and other historic neighborhoods, I would add that, that my first acquaintance with, getting involved in historic properties in Tucson was, buying an 1880s Adobe in Presidio in the mid-70s. And, that's when I kind of woke up to where I was and, fell in love with the building tradition. Already fell in love with Tucson long before, but so and then it was pretty early on in the residential usage of that neighborhood, and found myself pretty quickly involved in organizing an neighborhood association, which still goes on today. So I have a long kind of connection to and appreciation for the efforts that it takes to keep this, the character of a place, of a piece, because it's so many things are constantly challenging the fabric of a place, and the role of trying to go, wait a second, before you just jump in and put your, your 7-Eleven right in the middle of it. Can we just have a conversation? So I appreciate the efforts the neighborhood takes to really involve itself and consider these projects as they come up. I have been in designing now for about 55 years, split between here and California, and came back about 10-15 years ago. Not planning on working, but luckily opportunities arose that were became very compelling to become involved in. I'm always trying to find a way to make Tucson feel more like Tucson instead of some anonymous place, and that's the kind of projects I'm interested in doing. This is just to drop you down in the middle of it. This is the concept we've arrived at through much conversation, much iteration, a lot of thoughts about how one could go about defining a school in a relatively few number of feet on a very busy street on a double wide entry. How do we go about it with no really? There's nothing else in approximate. We don't have an Old Main. We don't have a mall. We don't have anything to signify that there's a school there. So the entry kind of has to carry the full load of representing the school to the world. It's the face where that happens, the interface where that happens. So we were looked at a lot of ways to get there, but pretty much quickly settled on the notion of a very traditional way of going about that. But Cor, if you got those precedents in there, I thought it might be helpful just to, we don't have a lot of precedents in the neighborhood, at least that I'm aware of, to point to. You can start, it's well, yeah, that's one. Far left, the first, that's not one. I'm sorry. This was going to be the trick. Yeah, that one right there. I mean, there's a tradition, it seems, for using. I mean, the idea of the column and wall approach is got a long history here as a means to define an entry. And we determined pretty early on that we wanted to stick within that format. We could kind of cruise. This one's at the Voice Arboretum. This goes way back. The next, there's a few more in there. Here's one we all know. Here we go again. Pretty much the same notion of column and wall.
How old is that?
I'm just call me Courtney knows. 1914. Cool. Yeah.
1914.
Yeah. And it's somewhat instructive. The columns are about the same size, a little bit slightly smaller. But of course, what's interesting to note is that the actual road width there is even a little bit narrower than even one of our entry secrets. You know, our footprint for defining who we are is over twice that wide, and as well as being in a completely uncontained context. I think there might be a couple more in there. I think there was, yeah, well, then of course there's this, you know, and this is, I don't know, I've tried to figure out when this one was, what got built, but I assume this is probably in the thirties or forties or something. It was supposed to be. Yeah. And
It's a WPA.
it seems like Mike, yeah, it's you know, it could be, it's got that plaque on it. It's almost seemed like it's maybe it's designed around that plaque, but I'm not sure how recent that is. But again, whoever you know, at that moment, and when it came time to do it, you know, again, it was determined here, right here in the neighborhood, you could approach it with columns and wall to do that. The last one on here is
Just a second.
Oh, please. And while we're holding, David Peets, who is also on the board, has joined us. Where's David? Sorry. Just,
yeah.
well, I don't know. Oh.
It wasn't sharing on mine.
It, for some reason, it's not letting me share my whole window. I have to select each individual item.
Yeah, that was
That's the issue.
the tricky part with the Zoom. That's why I'm glad you're doing it, Corinne.
Well, usually it does let you do that. I don't know why it's not
Yeah,
letting,
but
it's kind of unusual,
there's always something.
yeah. Okay. is
The
there
last one,
one-
the last one, scroll up a little bit, we get back to present. And now, yes, scroll up one more,
Mhm.
one
Oh,
more.
okay. Here. I think that's it.
There, no, that's the far left there. Far
Here?
left and third one down,
Okay.
third one down.
Oh, black and white, okay.
Yeah. I thought this was kind of instructive. You know, this was, although the entry to the hospital, with the archway is kind of a classic way of handling an entry to a building. The collection of these things, but especially kind of the monumental quality, the columns that are left there, the portions of the walls that are left there as almost monoliths or columns, almost to the point of abstraction, became kind of inspiration for me as well, because I think what we want, we realize our kind of our mission here was, yeah, we are in this remarkable context with all this history that the Fort Lowell has to turn to and to draw from, and it's absolutely fundamental to the direction we take. And then at the same moment, we are this school that is very current. It's certainly invested in a classical education, but it's very much about what is the moment, what's happening, what are the tools that kids need today? Like I think you mentioned the MIT kind of lab that's there. There's a lot of emphasis on the future, like the technologies and the skill sets that kids are going to need in the future. And the school, we realized, doesn't stand purely on tradition. It stands with a foot in the has to have a foot in the future as well. So that became kind of the challenge of the project. How do we make sure we ground ourselves in the tradition, but can we find a way to present it that's got maybe not exactly like it's been presented before? So, and I think that may or may not become a challenge for, you know, as we go through the evening here. That is a challenge we took on and tried to find a Goldilocks spot between tradition and the future. And the entry's got to kind of represent the whole story, I guess is what I'm getting at. And I think that was the goal. So I think, well, what do we got there? That was the next folder. Is
I
it?
think you want to go to aerial.
Oh, yeah, let's go in the areas, just so we make sure we understand maybe the scale of what the whole overall site and how much of it is occupied by the footprint of this project of the entry. There you go. Corin, I'm so happy you're doing this. So there we have the whole site and kind of in the red crochet there, and then highlighted right there on Craycroft is the area occupied by the footprint of the entry. So that is hopefully everybody's pretty well acquainted with what that feels like there. We have a before picture in the Gregory School folder. And I think that the biggest challenge is as we approached it was, we have a very kind of undistinguished stretch to contend with. A very wide boulevard with Craycroft there, very, a classic Tucson boulevard. It's very wide, and then we have this also now this not just a single 25-foot opening, but two of them with a median, and with a lot of traffic lights and traffic controls and crosswalk signals, and but mainly, but nothing adjacent to it. So we're just kind of, there's no, it's kind of a scaleless place. How big does something have to be in order to be to have some presence, to do the job of creating presence? And I think that became the first real challenge, just defining the scale of it. I think there in Corin, you'll find in mock-ups, and maybe if you go to the mock-ups folder.
This mock-up, or you have?
No, I think there's a folder called mock-ups. Because, it's one thing to draw, it's one thing to think about, it's one thing to, but we felt it was important enough to get this right, to actually pay for and take the time to mock up full-scale mock-ups, so we could all stand there, and that first one, if we could back up to, would be helpful. Because it was really a matter of because 42 inches by square by 10 foot high sounds somewhat formidable, but it's all relative, and it's to its location. It's in that folder, just the next other, far left.
This one.
Yeah. Just for a moment to see it. So there, so this isn't just artist rendering eyewash. This is the real thing, photographed. Yeah, right there. At the actual scale. So what sounds like a formidable scale of column, pretty quickly starts to settle in to and create it's a presence for itself, but it doesn't feel like we're looking at 2001 here with I find these I hope to our eye we've resolved for us that we were pretty much on track with the right scale with that mock-up, so that hopefully is helpful for you as well. One for instance might be a little tricky, but there's a I think in Tucson Botanical Garden. That was a project I was lucky to find myself offered when I first came back to Tucson about 10, 12 years ago. And maybe you probably maybe acquainted with it. This is what the entry was looking like at that time, and they knew they needed to do something just to distinguish themselves. I threw this in here just as kind of for fun in a way, because it's this iteration process. How do you arrive? There's a million solutions you can come to, right? There's as many solutions as are people to think them up. And this was a notion by an architect previous to myself had come up with as an entry for the garden there. I thought it'd be fun to include it because the next one, okay, yeah. Well, want to back up one? Yeah. So, this is a point of contrast here. I thought this might be kind of interesting because I think you can see that the difference between one designer's approach and another's in terms of like where the character was going, where the previous one was very much about grabbing some ideas from the Getty Museum with those big umbrella trusses and lining those up and lots of cars and it just, in my mind, when I was brought in, it didn't seem to be the right fit for a little humble Tucson home that was built back in the 20s to 30s. And a garden, it should feel, in my mind, I thought, well, let's have it feel like you're going into a garden, you know, not into a parking lot, not into a lot of contemporary, you know, kind of sculptural things. How do we make this feel like maybe it's always been there and continue in a continuum of a history of this garden? So my predilections in this case were to steer it to a more traditional solution than a very modern solution, let's say. And now, Quan, if we go to the last one in this folder, I think I thought this might be instructive for those of you who recall the experience of being there. The columns here, what I did was the dotted red line is the size of the column we're proposing for Gregory School. And that the size of the column used there is a good 20% larger, at least 25%, 20%, let's say, larger in scale. And the footprint for this entry is half the size of the Gregory School in terms of overall length of it. We have to cover twice as much area. So, but when you go back, maybe now, Corner, go back to the photograph. You know, I don't, we never got any feedback from anybody that the photograph, yeah, that the scale of this solution was feels inappropriate to the street in the neighborhood or anywhere else. And that was, so that's also perhaps maybe a way to help to get a sense of relative sizes and scales of things and how they feel and where they are. So now let's move on to, I guess, the solution itself. I think it's, oh, I know, I'm sorry. Let's go to mockups again, because I think it's important again to share that we put a lot of time into studying this thing. Because we want it to be right. So yeah, that's a good one. So we had now the person who's going to be actually doing the Adobe construction here is Eric Means. This probably maybe acquainted with Eric. He's doing the restoration of Son of Air. He's built the Presidio Fort downtown. Oh, and he's kind of the go-to guy in the state for any Adobe project. So he's somebody who's been around this material for a long time. And so we have included him right from the get-go to have him help us kind of get a sense of what some of the ideas we had. So we were experimenting with different things we could do with Adobe we hadn't seen before. Could you do it? Could you ask Adobe to do that? And we had a lot of fun with it. We did a few more. You can just scroll through those if you would, Corin. Yeah. One notion occurred from the outset would be, could we do the columns in this with this as kind of zigguratted section like this, and isn't that kind of cool? Because in that, it's like almost a saguaro cactus is, and so the references for more the desert being, you know, a primary context was an attractive notion to begin with. And playing with ways to get shadow play on the wall by pulling some of those bricks out and create another pattern on the wall to create a little more visual interest and character to the wall. We also explored those things, and then we got back to some more straightforward solutions, try to get shadow on this wall, again, create like some scale to it, rather than just for the units, which you see on a flat wall. You can read the units, but to pronounce it, to give it a little more depth and character. And we felt strength, and also to bring it a little more in the moment, we kind of explored this belt coursing kind of notion. So we had a lot of these on the table, we mixed them all up, and when we came down to it, now going to go back, I guess, to what we wound up with was a kind of a combination, but slowed it all down into something a little more subtle. Maybe that, you know, maybe that one, that's a good one. So we took that in the column where before we had a whole column done with that kind of zigguratted approach. We decided it might, if we snuck it in as on every fifth course, just again, to break up the scale of that column and bring some shadow play, a little interest into that column would be an interesting approach and a little less expressive, a little more within a tradition. And then the wall was we pretty much like the mock-up, except we doubled up we put 2 courses instead of just one horizontal course.
Tell me that once more. We put 2 courses.
Well, yeah, you're going to get that picture right behind it. That's not over, like going from, yeah. You see how that's a one, that's every other course is protruding and receding. We
Okay.
just doubled that up and made it 2 instead of the 1. And that's what you'll see back in that. Oh, God, Quan, I'm so glad you're doing this. Not me.
Do you want one of these?
Yeah,
photos or
let's,
the site plan?
Let's go back to that last one, that wall column right there, yeah. So if, in case there's something, because that, you can pretty clearly see what's being proposed there.
So
Can you
that,
see it, Mary Lee, how I said 2
yes.
or 2 horizontal courses and then an indent and 2 courses, yeah, so. And that's what we wound up with.
And then it looks like it's 2-dimensional with the gray and the tan. There where the young man's in front of
Yes,
the.
the wall is configured in a way that, so this is the, let's say the south wall and to the south of on the south side of the entry. So we have a column right there at the curve. And then we have a section of wall, it's 15 feet long, that is 8 feet high, just right around 8 feet high. And it runs for 15 feet, and then it drops down to a 6 foot high. So there's kind of a stepping of the wall, which is something you've seen in Elvis precedents.
So it's not 3-dimensional, it's one.
1-dimension.
Let's go, can we pull up a plan?
Right.
Are you
I
starting
see why you see it, it says that, though, it gives that appearance.
Yes.
Yeah.
Plans?
Yeah, let's look at a plan of the entry. I think it's its 2nd or 3rd sheet. Yeah, you could just back up and that PDF to, yeah, that gets it there. So now we can see. So what you were looking at was the column and then the first 15 feet of wall that's at 8 feet high. And then then this steps down to 6 feet high for this portion of it.
So the column's not attached to the wall. The column's not attached to the
No,
wall.
this is actually how how pedestrian entry
Sidewalk
here.
goes
Yeah.
together.
Yeah, so it creates this little kind of vestibule in a way, again, kind of a way of creating some interest and character to it rather than just a flat wall condition.
And you don't, and do you replicate that on the right?
Oh, yes, it's totally symmetrical.
Okay.
Everything's completely symmetrical.
And there was
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
please, I think
I
there's no other folder in there. Is there? I think we exhausted you, if not figured
This
images.
is beautiful. You had a white box on that north edge. When you
There-
showed it what's currently there. Is it hidden or is it
It-
staying?
we're-
What is
We
that?
are trying, I think that's a control, I think that's a traffic light control.
Oh,
And we are doing our best I can with landscaping.
okay.
To just, and
Hide it.
yeah, we're.
Yeah, well, you know what?
Yeah, we're,
What it was, what
If we-
historic feature of.
if we go back to or if we go back to the first, our primary rendering, just to, I hope what is apparent, what we're trying to do here is create a frame, like a portal, in a sense, which is an entry experience. We're trying to create enough between the walls and columns and the landscape material. Is we're trying to kind of shutter down the whole thing so that you could focus, so your interest is drawn through this entry in the interior by giving it a very strong and defined window and frame. So we've actually created a sense of place. You actually feel like you're going somewhere now. And that is the ultimate intention here, is to make you think, oh, I want to go in there. There's something really going on there and I want to go in there. So that is, and we feel that the scale of it, the character of it achieves that. And I'm hoping that beyond the Gregory schools, institutional needs and desires for presence there, we're hoping as equally that this looks like something, if you're somebody driving down from the foothills or vice versa out, and they drive by this. I'm hoping that, it may, evoke, oh, we must be in Fort Lowell, this feels like, this feels like the Fort Lowell neighborhood. It's as much about, we're hoping that this will feel like a value added to the neighborhood, and to this stretch of somewhat, indistinct part of the strip, Craycroft all the way up to the foothills. Can we create something of distinction there that's as much of, that's gonna make people blasting by feel like, they're someplace unique and special, and that we're all served by this in the end. I'm happy to talk more about, I'm sure you have a lot of very specific questions at this point, because I'm happy to try to field the questions.
And we are open for questions. And
I have a question regarding, I think I read something about, a light for the Gregory School sign.
Yes,
How is that gonna look and where is it?
well, if you notice to the left and right, you can see the Gregory School.
Yes.
Those are embossed, chiseled letters in a concrete monument. It's built into the wall, so it's flush with the wall. That I think is, we felt at night, again, to give, to try to get us an evening presence as well, that would be important to front light the wall. And so, actually, it's pretty great. There's a guy who worked for the firm out of New York. They're about, I think, the best respected firm in the country, if not the world. They like the Washington Monument. One of the principals of that firm moved to Tucson, or has a home in Tucson now. And I thought he might enjoy doing a project in Tucson. And he was thrilled to have it's not quite the scale of things. It's not the Washington Monument, but this is a guy. This is somebody who spent a lot of time thinking about how do you like, places with this distinction. So he's proposing, there's a grade-based built into the right down grade, like uplight that's gonna primarily light the light, but it's also gonna catch some of that wall, pull out that character, and we have an uplight on each column. So each column will be uplit and this will be lit here is on each side. And we also notice here we're kind of reserving a spot. We're working on now like kind of an identity for the school that as many classic school universities identities are often handled as a medallion like thing. And so we're working on that now. And we don't have it done yet, but we're kind of indicating that we would have, the school's medallion would be the centerpiece of the whole thing on an iron kind of screen.
okay. Do you need to remove any trees to do this?
We do not. In fact, on the right side, just to the right of that right column, we don't know exactly, well, there's a branch of one of the trees that we're gonna actually cut a notch, kind of a hole in the wall for that to actually pass through. So that because there are a lot of challenges to this very simple project, but many of them have to do with where we could locate as a result of a myriad of infrastructure, setbacks, easements, vision lines. There's so many, and all the underground traffic and light. It's crazy. So we wound up finding that I think the sweet spot that impacts the existing landscaping the least, and we're actually going to we've been opening the wall for one of the branches of that tree on the right to pass through. And we're adding more trees that like to the left on the left side. That would be a mature version of what we'll wind up with.
Are those trees there, or did you put them in?
I
To show what it looked like.
The ones that are right on the left column,
Right.
far left, that's not there.
Okay.
The next one's over, are
Right,
there.
right.
The two to the far left are there, yeah. And so
More trees is better.
yeah, so we're sticking with to that end. This landscaping here is pretty accurately rendered in terms of what we're proposing. In the background, we're adding some more mesquite trees to kind of fill out the box that's already there, to infill that. On the far right, to disguise the, there's a lot of stuff over there we don't look at. It's a big hole kind of that just kind of just would bleed our whole, destroy the idea of keeping you focused on the entry. So we have a lot of creosote to plant behind. Oh, there's one other feature here I suppose I should suggest, should speak to, and that is we've added this kind of a horse split rail fence to the starting at the far left and far right end that we're proposing to extend to the far south and far north bounds of the property to define not just the entry, but to kind of help define the whole property, the whole domain of the school. So so there's something that kind of represents the whole footprint of the school there. And we thought the way to achieve that and also is about a kind of I think to Basie Tankersley, who founded the school, started the school, was a horse person. This was a horse ranch. To have that one reference and handle it that way might be a way to bring in, again, more immediate context of the history of the school, along with the.
And is that what we're seeing at the far right?
Yeah, you can see it on the far right there. And it's also on the left of the shadow. Yeah.
One of the standout features for me in our historic district, so specific to Fort Lowell, because I don't really know other places, but are the corners, the edges are rounded and soft. And if you look at the commissary, the edges are soft. And this appears to be adobe that has a very straight edge on each of the corners.
Yes.
And that would be something that I don't know how to ask you to handle that, but to tell you that for me, that is something that is specific to this historic district and makes a difference when you're here as opposed to someplace else even in Tucson, because we do emphasize that. And the other piece, and that's, I'm really thrilled with like your 8-foot wall coming down. Because that is something that we have walls that have these step downs in them. However, in the end, the long walls are long and straight edge. And I don't know that that's a deal breaker, but it is something that is again in our neighborhood. And when you look even at when you saw the roundness, I didn't realize those are really old buildings in the fort, by the fort and all that. But when you saw that, and it's just so much a part of our historic district, as are the walls that, they're chinked and broken, but I don't think they ever started straight and so it is something that is different. On the other hand, I really appreciate this. I really appreciate the Adobe's.
I think it's right. That seems right when we thought about the material for the project.
Yeah.
I mean, if we had a lot of ideas about all the materials it could be, but everybody right from the beginning said, hey, Fort Lowell, in Tucson, what could be more expressive of the history of the place than the Adobe. So we were thrilled with that determination. And of course, we figured, well, I guess hopefully the neighborhood would see that again. That's one other way we're gesturing to the history of the neighborhood. And of course, those are the comments of and concerns about, let's say, the roundedness versus. Yes, I may know that when I'm trying to find that sweet spot, as I mentioned, between what is new moving forward versus the past. I mean, the erosion is a wonderful thing, and that's a lot, and it does make things, lovely and soft and sweet, and I love it. I mean, I and myself, but in terms of trying to find the different things to play with, and what makes it more historical, what makes it more contemporary. Certainly, if we kind of shaved off and try to make this all look rounded and eroded and warm and soft, we would lose the notion of, well, how do we make this look like a school of the future as well? That is an intentional thing in our part of it, to try to reference the future rather than something that's kind of just old and settled in and worn in, and lovely and soft. We're kind of, so just to know, not a point of contention, but just to know that why it was an intentional thing to leave. Kind of going back to that image of the hospital, you know, when you saw that, you could see how abstract, those were that was very squared, and that was kind of the tell for me. It was like, oh gosh, that it's that striking kind of spareness. Okay, it's kind of an abstraction of a thing rather than a thing itself. It's and that's kind of what gives it, I think, the contemporary aspect, which is why it got there.
And then on the original, the photo of what's there now, there was an adobe wall off to the right. There's an old wall there. And what happens to that wall? Is that,
The old monument. even.
is it the old monument
It's a
sign?
sign,
It's
yeah.
a sign?
Yeah, it was, what was that, about 20? I'm not sure if Mary would know. It's not that old. It was, it's not a historic adobe wall.
No, I
It's just
didn't,
the
but,
original
but, and
monument
you're
sign.
taking it down.
Yes,
It
that's
goes
good. That's
away.
behind, it would be behind that.
Briggs hasn't had that.
Briggs. You wanna, you have to.
Yes, just to follow up on Mary Lou's comment, I do understand what Mary Lou's saying, and I think that one of the most interesting elements of this design is the cutout for the tree limb. And that accommodation brings that more organic rhythm and flow to what is a significant linear structure. So I just really appreciate that feedback. If you've got another limb you want to accommodate, I think that's a fabulous route to bring a little bit more texture while still finding that sweet point you've been speaking about.
Great. Well, it may be, we still have the project of actually finally did preliminary studies and laid this out on the site. But we will, when it comes down to the day where we drop those lines and make the commitment, I'm sure we're gonna find other relationships to some of these trees and limbs and stuff we might have to fine tune, because until we do that, we don't know exactly where we're gonna hit every single possibility. Right now, the one we've mentioned is the one we've discovered. And if there's other opportunities, we're gonna, if we can lean into leaving a tree versus taking it out, that's gonna be, that was one of the great challenges of the project, was to find a spot where we could put this that would meet the regulatory requirements and not take out any trees, not take it, have the minimum impact on our existing landscape there.
Well, was there any consideration to the ends, like the far north and the far south, being stepped down? Like, it looks like there's a step up on the.
There is not
not
a
as-
pronounced pier at the end or a step down. It does thicken at the end. It does, I believe, it
Does it cut back?
thickens.
Does it cut back?
Now, we could look at the plan. I've got a little, I'm trying to recall, we went back and forth with a couple of ideas there, but we may, but it's nothing you're gonna notice from the front, and you wouldn't even notice it from the side. It's just that I think if we zoomed in on it, you might see it's slightly thickened to give the wall a thicker
Like
appearance.
a
at the
fungus kind
ends.
of appearance, or
Yeah, we wouldn't.
you
Okay.
can see it there.
Yeah.
You can see it very well.
It was on another set of drawings,
Mhm.
but,
Yeah.
we can see,
Sort
well, look
of
at
bumps
the
out,
far, look at the
yeah.
far, right end of the wall. You see how there's that little step in it right up there?
Yes. Each
Because
one has, each side has a
Yeah,
step. doesn't
so that
it?
we wind up with a bigger looking column at the end, not just the end of a wall thickness, which was if we're looking at the end, would look too skimpy, so we had to, we it appear.
Mhm.
So I'm getting different sort of senses. So the long north-south wall, and then as it turns west, and then that is a continuous wall.
Yes,
correct? Okay. It
yes,
just doesn't look, I don't get that sense from the mock-up.
or from the rendering.
Yeah, from the render.
Well, try it.
I guess because there are trees there.
Yeah, there's
Sort of,
it's a little eye-washy on every detail. It's not, that may not come across, but hopefully from the plan,
Mm.
that you
I
can
think
see
I know,
what the
it's
intention
clear from the
is.
plan.
Yeah.
What's the length of the wall, the straight wall, the 6-foot wall?
I think it's about 40 feet. There's another sheet of dimensions on it.
Necessarily look that way.
Because there's so much area.
I guess,
It's-
right? I guess that's it.
And I'm really trying to wrap my head around, this is not a house, this is not a, you know,
That's a good
it's a,
point.
What do you
it's a
think?
monument.
Updated version?
And I'm really trying to wrap my head around that, where it's need to be different and yet blend without giving up the pieces that are so important to you all.
Yeah, well, there's a whole tradition of entrance to things, right? And they're not houses, you know, then I realize it's a challenge in a way for the neighborhood to have to contend with something that's kind of outside of the language of the specific things you have got to deal with. This is not like a, you know, it's not a residence. And it's a,
Very good.
Yes.
One of the problems, I think, that the board faces in evaluating this is we have these standards, our guidelines, design guidelines. And in reality, those were written in the context of small residential structures.
Mhm.
But within our precinct, we have sub precincts. So we have the Fort era buildings, and then we have the El Fuerte era buildings, and then we have these contemporary overlay buildings, all of which are residential and pretty small in scale. But if you think that a little bit further back of the whole area that we're in, it's always had, or it's long had, some commercial buildings, La Tiendita being one example. The marginal. We've had religious occupancies in the San Pedro Chapel and also in Protestant, which is now the Pan American Literature Hall. Agricultural, certainly with, what they mentioned, the Redwood pipeline, stock farms and equestrian occupancies.
Mhm.
And so there are things that are inherent in those or that attach to those that really don't, there's no template for it within our design guidelines. We even had industrial at one time with the Adams, Atkins tank fabrication. And then now we come around to education. So we have the, I think it's fair to say, pitifully small ruins of the original schoolhouse, which after all was at a residential scale. But now, as we zoom out a little bit, we're talking about this 21st century and beyond, you know,
The century, yeah, yeah.
this school, the Gregory School. And so it really doesn't fit. There's no way to neatly nest that into our, the guidelines that we've used for reviewing residential properties. But if you look at it from a community planning standpoint, when you have, and this is why I like the notion of the split rail fence, as well as the obvious statement of gateway. When you have a precinct within a larger context, it's made much stronger if it has something that defines its boundaries. And it's critical that it have a prominent main entry.
Mhm.
So this fits into, just good practice in planning. There's a guy named Christopher Alexander who's studied that extensively. And he makes that point. He says, any part of a town, large or small, which is to be identified by its inhabitants as a precinct of some kind,
will be reinforced and helped in its distinctiveness, marked and made more vivid if the paths which enter it are marked by gateways where they cross the boundary. And then he speaks elsewhere about further defining the precinct by demarcating. Like when we did the survey of San Pedro Chapel, people have surveys and plans have a tendency to get lost, especially when there's, you know,
Volunteers.
Oh, yeah, right. And so when we had it surveyed, I asked Bill Anderson to have the surveyor place concrete monuments at each of the corners that, rather than just the, you know, the little surveyor's medallion that's on the end of the rebar. So that it'd be easy to find them and go back and say, this is, not that we went beyond that in terms of any structural response. So I think this whole gesture and its breadth and in its scale is really gonna do the job.
Mhm. Given what you've just said and the rails, I have no experience with this rail fence, so
Margot has one.
Margot has one,
And she has a real fence.
a rail fence, so.
Just,
It's
in
not
this,
white, it's a real fence.
is it 3 rails or 2?
It, hmm. 3.
Yeah, which is a little more conventional, but that felt like that'd be too much of a presence. So this is just the top rail. This one's about 5 inches off the ground. So it's a very, one of those very kind of a low, which you often see in various ranch usage, but it's not as high as a conventional 3 rail horse fence. It's only 24 inches.
Is it gonna be painted? Is it raw wood? Or-
No, one of the big things you gotta do, I think, to make life for an institution like this manageable is come up with materials and solutions that aren't gonna require enormous amounts of maintenance or fall apart. There's a company that actually now produces this split rail fence and precast concrete.
Oh, wow.
So it looks just like, the conventional split rail fence, but it's kind of for the ages. And we would, they come stained in various neutral tones, but I think we would be leaned into the very traditional white as the, we probably would wind up painting this and expecting that'll take on some character without, and necessarily if the paint starts to wear out and look a little old and faded, we don't have to worry about the fence falling apart.
I'd like to make a comment that, when we first talked about this, which is now several years ago, we just first started to look at it and we've talked about it a couple of times. And I first had some concerns about the height, the original height, and then the height of the wall that came down. But, over time, I think it does become a statement, and it does become a statement that's an entry to, you've just come into someplace different. Even from not just the perspective of the school, but the perspective of the district. Because people come flying down Craycroft and they don't realize they've entered a historic area until you get to the park, if they even see the park as they fly by at 50 miles an hour. But I like the texture of the wall. I like the columns. I like the way it's been put together. And then you do go next to the Adobe del Bosque development, which is just to the south, and that's all done with stabilized adobe. So then you make that transition, then you make another transition into the historic district,
Yeah.
to the historic Ford. And then, into this neighborhood, which is even more. So I really do like it. I would like to see some tone down of a white fence, though. I mean, I like the idea of the split rail, it accommodates. But I'd like it not to be Tanque Verde, because you see that kind of fence in Tanque Verde.
Yeah.
And, that kind of ranch thing.
Yeah.
But here it's almost always been, it hasn't been a white fence.
What's yours? Is this natural wood?
Wood.
Yeah, if I'd known about the.
Well, and I was even thinking like some of the different colors of white that could give it something that lends itself
Well,
to
that's-
tan that still looks white,
Yeah,
but
we
but
will have,
that's,
that is, there's they do have their stock tones, they do have a lot of things in the beigey kind of grayish zone, so I'm sure we can find something. It'll save the school money if we don't have to paint it, so that might be, also a benefit, and if it helps, it's not the most crucial part about it, obviously, so it's, and I can understand that maybe that seems a little too forward to have it, just class of white, but I think that's something we have to look with.
And Alan, I want to go back to your markings of the edges of the property. Did you have a recommendation for this one with that, or is that just?
No, I'm just
information?
saying that, that to help us maintain the integrity of this piece of property, we wanted to make sure that people didn't come back and say, well, like the factor saying, well, I've got this driveway here, so this is my land.
Yeah.
It was just to, make it more permanent.
And defining the bounds of it, right?
Yeah, more in plan than in
Yeah.
any kind of a sense that you would.
We just elevated it here.
And I do think the Gregory School's really done a good job of trying to accommodate the architecture in this district.
Great. But hoping that would be the spirit in which it would be seen now. Yes, it's important to us right from the beginning.
Any other discussion? Any other questions? Good? Good. Somebody could make a motion.
So
I do not. So somebody else.
Well, am I supposed to say I nominated to or approve it or something?
I move
I
that
move that,
we accept it as it is, or I move that we accept it with concerns for the color of the
Yeah.
split rail fence. We approve it, really like, and suggest that they look for other opportunities to put holes for tree limbs or whatever you want to put on the table. So all that's good.
ditto.
No, you can't. Okay,
Okay,
okay.
is that on record?
No.
No. So,
Go ahead.
go ahead, I'll give it a try. We move to accept the plans as presented with one concern centered on the proposed color of the split rail fence.
As well as accommodating other additional tree limbs if that arises.
Sure.
These are my
I would accept it as a friendly amendment.
So we need a second.
We need a second.
I'll second that motion.
Briggs seconds, okay, thank you. Any other discussion? No?
Just
Yes.
a procedural one, I guess.
Good luck with us.
I'm looking for, I think we'll have the answer for this. Will this mean that we will need to come back for another review, or is this just, or does this allow us to move forward with this understanding in place as long as we satisfy it?
I mean, it depends on the board's preference, but this is usually something that would then move forward to the next stage of review, then get a decision. Often things like color, sometimes the board just wants to be updated later, what you've decided. So it might be a visit or an email to the chair or something like that,
Good.
but that's something you guys can also put in your motion, if you'd like.
Mhm.
Great.
So the motion would include a statement that says you'll informally return
Yes,
information about the
right.
color,
Review by the paper.
but it doesn't come back to review,
Great.
right? Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Unless you feel that it warrants that, there are times you guys have done minor reviews for something that had a number of things like that, but this sounds like something that could just be an informational update to the board.
Okay, we need to vote on this. Margot, do you accept?
Except,
Okay. David,
Yes.
Briggs,
Yes.
and I, so it passes unanimously with those
It's
two
good news.
suggestions. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
This really was nice work. Thank you very much. Oh, Alan's book.
No, this is a deep dive. This is what you love. This is what I love.
Cool.
Call it. It's- it-
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's section. Now, let me get that. I'm Tom, I'm Scott.
Move over to the table.
I mean, that section you read was so relevant to this discussion, I couldn't believe it. Thanks. Thank you, yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you. That's
Appreciate
great.
being here.
Thank you. Thank
You
you.
should come to us, one of our Catlin and Foothills Association, total chaos.
We have a chaos too, just not right this minute.
I mean, they'll be here, so I can get answer to them. We're gonna be- that's what we do.
Oh, wait.
Oh, well, no one's gonna trip on this one.
Maybe we could be able to share. Oh, wait, actually, do I need to make you a co-host?
Okay, and this is a presentation of the commissary building rehab.
Yeah, cheers.
Who the iPhone was?
Yes, Sarah Fontaine.
Sarah, that's right.
She's the architect with Peter County,
Oh.
and she's with us.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So,
You're able to share now.
let's see. Perfect.
Yeah, so we can launch it. Recording.
Okay. My name is Drew Cook. I'm a poster Merton McDonald, the design professional on the project. So tonight we'll be showing three of parts of the project. This is a courtesy review. Right now, we are submitting on Friday for a 50% SD or CD design. And that is used as we're going through a process where we're submitting, getting a cost estimate, and then sort of value engineering what we can afford. Because the money for this whole project is coming from the 407 bond, is that correct? And these two buildings, both the commissary and the Donaldson House, are noted in that bond. So we'll start with the Atkins parking lot. And this is an overview of the whole project. And we have the three sites located here on the map. And we have the Atkins parcel parking lot, which is 1, the commissary noted as 2, and then the Donaldson House noted as 3, which is at the northwest corner of the park. So here's the site in question, and currently there's parking there. I believe it's 7 spaces with 2 ADA. And what we're going to do, oh, and here you go. Here's the existing setup. And our plan is to develop it with 37 spaces, so that'll be 33 parking spaces plus 4 ADA spaces. The intention here, or the design, is to have a decomposed granite compacted parking, so there won't be asphalt. The only surface change that we'll be doing is we'll be doing concrete for the ADA parking spaces, as well as possibly the walking path up to Old Fort Lowell. Here's a zoomed in view of it, just so you can take a look. And currently, right now, we're figuring out how the landscaping is going to go. Jen, our landscape architect, has not brushed her strokes on this yet, so.
This parking lot was actually designed and permitted about 10 years ago. We only have enough money to do the western part of it.
So how much, given what's there, how does this expand? Or does it?
So you can see, we'll absorb the existing driveway, and then this will come down south.
So it takes up some of that property. And the circles with the hatches through them or the lines through them,
Uh,
what's that?
Some schematic design, we're sort of questioning, that's the outline of what was or is the cottonwood lining of the parade grounds. So that's not, we have, this is, again, this is sort of schematic design, so you're seeing what we're working on at the current moment.
Okay. Because you'll be taking out trees to do this.
Um,
Or is it just brush?
It's mainly creosote and some shrubby mesquite, but the plan is to bring in new trees and new landscape.
So it would extend south to basically the edge of the white frame.
Yes. Showing forward.
You go back to that, I just want to
Yeah.
explain. So some of you may know this, maybe not. Go to the next one back. Oh, yeah, that one. There were fort buildings in right through here and then right through there. So we are west of the westernmost fort buildings, not on the footprint of any historic archaeology from the fort. We're beyond west of that.
Was that surveyed for Hohokam? You know?
But yeah, everything.
So the existing parking lot now was, and then the area west of there.
It was,
or
and
there
when
was-
we build the parking lot and when we will build it, we're not going to be doing any grading down, we're going to be adding earth back up.
No, I'm just trying to remember whether that whole area was surveyed or not.
The whole
Yeah.
site
Yeah.
is surveyed.
And
Scott,
then-
is that?
That's correct, yeah. I think you can find their documentation online on the.
Yeah, there's a
I
very,
know, I just
you
didn't
know
go
it,
back
right?
and look, yeah. And then that sidewalk, is that what's depicted there, that's just to the east of the parking lot?
Yes,
Is that the idea?
well, yeah, it's
The-
proposed at the current moment.
Yeah,
probably not in the scope of work though. The one to the east of it is not in the scope.
So where would you said there might be a concrete, and I understand you
There
gotta
will
do
be
something for
concrete at the
ADA.
ADA, yes.
So I see, I'm not worried about the ADA parking spots. I understand that, and wherever you can figure out to place them, go for it. But where is there a sidewalk?
So you
From
can
on the-
see the walkway here.
It's this one.
Yeah, and
It's
this,
not
this
around
may,
the
this may,
parking lot.
this is,
that's not in scope.
no. This may not be developed any further from this point. This is just sort of a past existing proposal that's getting
Okay.
folded into the new design.
Well, just to the left of where you were, what's that? You've got a narrow.
It looks like a walkway
Yeah.
by the parking lot
Yeah,
that
This right here?
surrounds the parking lot.
Going north.
Go up,
Yeah.
yeah.
What is
Oh, that's the line, that's the center line through the parking lot, is what that is.
of the road?
Yes. Well, there you go. See how it's.
It's also important to
dashed.
explain the reason we're doing this expansion of the parking lot is because of the change of use of the commissary itself, which will have activities that will require more parking than is currently available on site.
But that's not gonna be concrete, whatever that. Okay.
More than likely. Okay, so moving forward to the commissary. Again, the commissary outline, this is the property line. And then I'm gonna let Jen.
Sure. So what we're looking at with the commissary, and this slide is gonna look at the outside of that footprint. But people would be parking at the parking lot that Drew just went through, and then it's looking at what is that entry sequence? How do you move to the commissary? So what we're showing is a connection to that existing neighborhood path that is on the south side of Fort Lowell. The brown square going across Fort Lowell, that would be a new speed table, so just similar to what you have further west on that. So a speed table there, we'd love to continue the idea of the neighborhood path, how you all have that removed from Fort Lowell. So what you're seeing on the north side of Fort Lowell with the green, that's bringing planting up to the street within the new walking path going behind that. The walking path right now doesn't continue on the north side to the west. It would be great if it did, but this is a way, at least in front of the commissary site, to tie into that. The entry to the commissary would be as it is now through the double gate, so you can see from the path going up to the gate. We would have like 3 20-minute parking spots on the north side of Fort Lowell. And the idea with that is if somebody, really has, like, we have those accessible spots on the south side of Fort Lowell, but if you're in a wheelchair or it's really hard to get over there, that's a long way to make somebody go. So somebody could drop somebody off at that parking space, let them get out, wait, and then go park. If there was a cafe and it's a quick pop in and get something and leave. So a little bit of parking there. We're also looking on this overview. You can see the driveway that is directly to the west of the commissary, and we're showing a truck in there. So that would be a service entry to the commissary. So if there is a cafe in that corner location, those delivery trucks would go in that existing driveway. We would have a pullout. And what we're trying to do with that is just eliminate conflict between visitors and pedestrians to the commissary and any kind of delivery setup that would happen there. There's also the little existing parking lot to the north of the commissary. And the plan with that is that would not be public parking, but that could be if somebody rented the community space that might happen in the commissary building. That could be space that, they're allowed to park in for unloading, for any kind of event that might happen there. And then the idea would be kind of your access to the buildings would be from inside of the courtyard and through there. So yeah, perfect. Next slide. So looking at, here we are blown in a little bit, so you can see that vegetation coming up to the edge of Fort Lowell, the temporary parking. And then once we get inside of the courtyard, the area that is in the light green, that would be area that would retain the existing vegetation, and then we would supplement that with, more I'm going to say site local appropriate native plants. We do have the Fort Lowell planting guide. We are native plant fanatics, so there's everything that we would plant, it would be appropriate for the site. But it's an awesome planting guide. We have thoroughly gone through that. The pathways here are in places that are currently devoid of vegetation. So it's really using those areas that are already circulated, but then filling in and narrowing those paths. We're showing an 8-foot wide kind of pathway through the site. The dark green circles, those are new trees that would be added to the site. The one that's kind of central, that is that existing tree ring. That the tree is now dead in, that dead tree would be removed and a new tree would go in. We are looking at using mesquite since that's the dominant tree there. The well site would be retained. That's kind of the white square that would be retained, fixed up just as an interpretive exhibit that could be used in the future. Other changes are the additions of some small patio space. So directly as you walk in the main entry on the left side where the green tree is, that would be a small patio space. We're looking at that as something with like a paver patio, and I have some examples of that directly north of the building between the cellar and the building where the little white circles are. Again, a small patio space that could be used by a cafe. And then on the far right, in the eastern portion where the green tree is over there, that's that existing kind of nook area with the earth floor that is open to the sky. That would be planting a tree in that space and also doing a paver patio in there. So that could be a small seating area. Towards the north, a little bit hard to see, but where that existing kind of old pond is, that is now a cacti garden, right in front of that, an area, yeah, thanks, Drew. Right in front of that, there's an area of already, kind of substantial size that could accommodate, some chairs, small group gathering. So the planting of an additional shade tree there to accommodate that space. And then just some benches along the pathway. So kind of a low-key addition to that.
What's the material of the pathway?
So stabilized DG, go one more slide, Drew, just so that we can, okay, on the bottom left, So that's just an example of a decomposed granite path. It would be stabilized so it could be accessible, but we're not thinking of any edger. So it's just a free form edge. So it's much more natural looking, just like a dirt path. And then while we're on this slide, the picture right to the right of that on the bottom right, that's an example of a permeable paver. So it's a concrete paver. What makes it permeable is the spaces that are in between that paver. It sits on some gravel, and so that way water can continue to infiltrate as it does now. And then go up one. And some examples of, you know, kind of what this space would look like. That first top right is Tohono Chul, just a clearing where you could have a little bit larger gathering with tables, umbrellas, and in those lower images, kind of some seating examples of what that might look like throughout. On the left is the picture, historical photo from 1942 of the well. And so thinking, you know, of bringing it back kind of to that appearance. And then the lower left is that tree ring that would be preserved in place. And on the next slide, just some of the other items, kind of example of paver patio space. On the far right, on the top, that's an example of a steel grate. The one thing that we do want to do is be able to incorporate water flow safely, and we'd like to do it under the pathways. So the water that comes down currently from the downspouts and hits those cool rock splash blocks. From there, we would like to carry that under the pathway via a steel grate. With the stabilized DG, it does not hold up well with water flow. So the idea would be DG on both sides, the steel grate, and water flows under that steel grate so we can preserve those pathways in place. And I know Drew's going to talk more about this idea, but just to touch on this, the existing cellar, the idea is to turn this into a really special place. I think one of the beautiful things about that when you're down in the cellar is it's much quieter. The street noise really dies away. The rock work is beautiful. So thinking of a way of allowing people to experience that. And the photo on the left is just showing, you know, a sunken area with steel grating, some fencing to keep people away from the edges, and Drew, I'll turn it to you.
Yeah, so this is kind of one of the challenges in the project is that there's 3 different choices on how to address the cellar. The cellar has some issues, the walls being unstructurally supported, as well as being 8 feet deep in the center. But you know, through the user groups we've worked with, they've made it clear that this is a very special piece of the commissary that they don't want to lose. So the three options that we've come up with is 1, a fence around it. 2 is to fill it in, and 3 is sort of this light structure that we've been working with Jen and kind of developing. So here's the how do we say this, the heavy touch version. The heavy touch version, which is an idea that we would create a steel structure inside the cellar that would be 30 inches below the top, which is what we're allowed to get away with without having to have handrailing. And then the structure itself would act as a diaphragm inside, pushing up against the cellar wall, because again, the cellar wall is over 100 years old and we don't know its structural support. And the idea would be that you could get in there and have a patio space and have opened up areas where the trees could come through. And that it can be utilized as a patio space or a part of the event space. You know, again, this may be out of our budget, and we've had a little bit of you know, questioning about the design. So we've also been looking at possibly just filling it in up to 30 inches below the edge, and then maybe creating some sort of wall at the end so you could see where, you know, at the northern side of the structure, there's still an adobe wall sitting on top of it. It's slowly melting away, and there's a tiny little hole, like a window that existed. So one of the ideas is that we create, you know, one space so you can see and appreciate what the scale and the volume of the cellar originally was. And then we went ahead and did some renderings as we were trying to work through the process to figure out, you know, how this would work. Did a night rendering, see how that's not showing too well on this, but The idea is that there would be lighting underneath and that we were gonna have some sort of permeable surface as the top of the structure that would allow the light to come through and kind of wash the walls.
How does it currently drain?
It's a great question. It
Yes.
doesn't-
It just
Yeah,
sinks in.
yeah.
And
And again, kind of another idea of just, you know, how it'd be used.
and how deep do you think it was originally?
It was 8 feet.
It was 8 feet, so
Yeah,
it's
I
at its
mean-
original height,
Along the edges, it's 6 feet.
but
In the base, it's 8. I mean, it may have been deeper, you know. A lot of the wall that was there is melted into the cellar itself.
And it was originally a building, the
there
building
was
is
a building
gone.
on top.
There was a building on
Yeah.
top, the commissary was a full U-shaped building, so the opening on Fort Lowell was a building in there as well. So the building had gone through ruins before the Bolsius family took it over. And the structure over the top of the root cellar was already gone, and it was just left that way.
So here's just some historic images of the original commissary, and as you can see, the Bolsius sort of developed it in sections. They kind of did a piece by piece. And I mean, it hasn't really changed much. Just want to include these, and you can see, here's the well. I don't know if that's the same well structure that's there now, but
It is.
our plan is to preserve that and rebuild the well and probably have to fill it in. So working on the commissary, we don't have a guaranteed user at the moment. So we're kind of developing it into an event space that possibly could, you know, be a place for small businesses, maybe a cafe, maybe bookstores, jewelers, you know, but it's unclear who the user is going to be in the future. So what we're trying to do is just maintain everything as best as possible. And we'll just start on the west side here. So you can see one of the issues is restrooms and ADA restrooms. In order to open this up to the public, we have to provide ADA access and restrooms. And as Jen was pointing out earlier, the entrance is going to be through the main gate instead of the front doors, because one, they're not ADA accessible, they have a step, and we really want to avoid changing anything on the exterior. So on the western building here, we're going to be providing 2 restrooms. One is almost ADA, except for you cannot bring a wheelchair through here. And this particular building has thresholds through almost all the doorways, but it'll provide 2 restrooms, and this is the space that we've deemed probably the best for a small cafe or I don't know, maybe a little bar or something.
The reason we don't know all the details of the user is the city of Tucson Parks and Rec is going to put out a request for proposals from users. And they will come forward and say, here's who we are. Here's what we intend to put in the building. Here's our business plan. So we're guessing at what seem like likely users, but we sort of don't have a client yet to design them.
And then the other issue that we've run into is how we're going to heat and cool the spaces prior. Oh, yeah, I was gonna work my way through there, but.
Okay.
Well, the next set of bathrooms, so we had 2 options, was to convert one of the spaces into a full ADA restroom or create an exterior building that was separate from the commissary, which we got a lot of pushback on. So what we chose was the smallest unit here, which was just this room and this little tiny, what we're calling the pimple. And it had the kitchen and the bathroom in it. And so this is the space that we're kind of taking over to create our ADA restroom, as well as a regular restroom with a little vestibule, and it would get closed off from this single unit. And that would be pretty much the only severe changes that we would be doing inside the buildings. And then working with our mechanical engineer, we've decided that we would like to go with vertical interior air conditioning units. So the fan coil would be inside and the compressor would be outside. This way we wouldn't have to put anything on the roof, as well as having sort of this modern looking mini split unit either mounted on the wall or on the roof. And and I don't know if you guys have been in there, but the ceilings in the space is beautiful, so we really want to avoid doing anything to those ceilings. So, and a part of the process that we've gone through and we've started to look at is that we have full bathrooms in almost every one of these units, which, you know, if we go to do a full restoration, we need to make a decision on what to do with the showers and the bathtubs. And kind of through the work we've done, we've decided that we're gonna maintain one of probably the best bathroom, because these bathrooms are pretty run down in some senses. Right now it's between these two, which is what we're calling unit 2 and unit 4, because they both have possibly the most beautiful bathrooms in them. You know, for unit 2 here, we've decided that we're gonna take the sort of tucked in shower and we're gonna stick our HVAC unit in there and then put a door on it, and this way it'll bury in and we don't really see a use for the shower anyways. If this was a, you know, a jewelry store or an art gallery, you know, that it wouldn't be that bad of a loss. In a few of these units is like the 3rd unit here, we're gonna stick a small corner unit and we'll probably close it in. Some of these have this angled existing furred wall that they had stuck the wall mounted radiators on there. And we're kind of exploring if we can find a unit small enough to fit in a situation like that, and then kind of replicate what's already happening inside the spaces. As a part of what we're doing too, we've decided to take out the majority of these radiators. Most of them are like 70s. There's 1 or 2 cases that are pretty beautiful. We may maintain them. And the same goes for the last unit, which we're calling unit 5. There's kind of a luxury, odd shaped square bathroom in the original space. And we're gonna take the bathroom and the shower out and then put the HVAC unit in here, as well as a small closet. And this is kind of the unit that we see as possibly becoming, you know, the community unit, as well as, you know, just maintaining the way it is because it has the largest room for gathering.
Did you say there was one that you thought would be appropriate for like a little cafe or something?
Yes, it's
They
the
would
west,
need
it's the west building.
It's the west building.
Yeah.
And so that,
So it has this nice little kitchen here, and then adjacent to it is a back room. And then, you know, guests can go through here and enter into the 2 bathrooms, as well as, you know, the obstacle of the ADA, we have the double door, so, you know, somebody who's handicapped or disabled can get through this double door, but the path to that restroom will have to be across the courtyard to this other unit. And then here's kind of just a color diagram so you can understand how the spaces are working together. So everything in blue sort of belongs to that unit, and the pink and the yellow. So this light pink, which is where the ADA bathroom was attached to the other, and that's, you know, the smallest unit, and it's the least amount of disturbance on its historic character. So I can stop here if you guys have more questions.
questions?
Okay.
It's a 90 question. Is it on city sewer system?
It is,
It is, okay.
but it will need all new sewers.
Yeah.
So that's where the issue started to come in, was are we gonna cut open the floors on every one of these to get to the bathtub? You know, we know through some of our neighbors' experience that the bathtub didn't even have concrete under them, so, you know, there's some unknowns coming in.
Do you want to talk about the commissary before you move to?
Yeah, that was,
So, going back to the diagram of the parking and landscaping.
The very first
one. Let's talk. So the parking,
You wanna go
This
this one?
parking or the parking on the Atkins property?
you guys want to talk about the buildings?
No, I'm happy to talk, go to parking.
So one of the things that we were talking about before in some of the earlier meetings we had, public-ish meetings. And the crossing into, there's still this big issue about it's a long way to walk. Right? Even its use as a small restaurant. Right, so is there a possibility to try to reconfigure that parking so that if you are using it in a disturbed area already, where the other buildings used to be, to move some of the parking closer to the commissary?
So move it more to the front, more to the,
More
towards
towards the
Fort Wall,
street, yeah,
and wider up there.
or even breaking it up.
Well, I think one of the reasons we chose to go with this scheme is that it's pretty much a family member to the existing design. So really it would just tie into what's here and extend without having to, you know, start doing major changes. And then I think we kind of got a little pushback in terms of archaeology, because this is a pretty heavy space right in here with the four buildings that were existing and the other features.
Can you go back to that site plan? Other one, no, next.
Oh, you want the front?
I want the one with the curvy lines, no. Yeah, that one. So a couple of things, this is, you'll recognize as one of the earlier schemes, and one of the things we talked about is a few concerns about this plan. One was the location of the delivery off the driveway, which is also an easement to the property behind. Number one. Number two, you had earlier talked about putting in a parking lot that was more in this direction, and then also clustering around the alley of the, not the alley, but the trees in the Cottonwood Lane. And then, so one of the things which we've not drawn yet, but I've been thinking about, is moving this to here, which would then most likely move this to here. Because you can't get that proximity. So we're still exploring that. This is where we were last time we talked. And we looked at the possibility of a parking lot in here, which you talked about, and also parking kind of under the trees. We don't know that we're getting those trees in this phase, and so parking under the trees that are not there is a bit of a problem, and it's pretty tight to do parking between the property line and the Atkins building. I think that's all the things you're referring to, correct?
Yeah, just the idea that, you know, to spread the parking further south makes it even further to access to the commissary, if you're trying to get to the commissary.
To the building across the street.
Yeah. And you.
Yeah, the other question is, if you have a big wedding there, you know, this new parking lot may not accommodate all the folks in there. And so there might be some overflow in, maybe some less formal parking.
They'd actually have to go across into the park. Yeah,
Or maybe some less formal parking in the areas you're talking about.
right.
Along the street.
On the property.
But is there, so when you talk about 50% design, what kind of agreement is there for this plan if it's at 50%?
Well, that's why we're here to talk about it.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. Is that, you know,
It's,
What are we with the
yours
second?
is 50%, but are we 100%? I mean, if we approve this, that's
This is not,
100%.
we're not going for approval at all.
This, you're just here
Just
to.
give an update for where we are and getting feedback on where we are today. And then, to be honest, the parking lot is actually not in our current scope. We're likely to add it to our scope, but it's not currently on our
you
scope.
mean the as it's
The whole
proposed
parking
here?
lot.
The Atkins
Yeah.
side,
Yes.
Yes,
but the one up above?
well, that's
Also not
existing. We're just proposing that being used. It wouldn't really be developed or encouraged.
And you have to understand that the two people in here are the people adjacent here.
Mhm.
So you
Yeah,
don't
you know,
be
that
back
like,
around.
Mhm.
we can start parking too.
With your garage.
With your, yes, you could. If you want to.
I have a question. I guess I'm not familiar with the restaurant industry and what it means in terms of having a delivery space. Like, how much frequency of use does that space anticipate? I don't know anything about what that means for restaurant delivery.
So to answer, it's a great question. The model that we're using in terms of the scale of this operation is the new
XO in Barrio Viejo, sometimes becomes the El Crisol Bar on some evenings, and that's a very modest kitchen, very modest, drinks and pastries and some food, but none of which is cooked on site. So I think those deliveries are rare, maybe a couple of times a week, or maybe a van that pulls up in the morning and drops off pastries, but not a big operation. For example, it is not likely to have a dumpster. It is likely simply to have movable barrels. So it's that kind of a light footprint.
It seems like a pretty large footprint for a truck loading dock for such a light use, when in respect to the 20-minute parking that's about the same distance from the cafe site. So just as one of the property owners that's the user of the private easement, my thought is that that's a lot of consumption for not that much need, when you're explaining the volume.
Agrees. We are looking at other alternatives to that.
Because it looks like a semi truck there. And one of the things that we have thought or tried really hard is to not let semis on Fort Lowell, mostly to protect these buildings because of their weight and.
Yeah, that's not a semi.
So it's not a semi truck, which is what I thought too.
The other intent was if there was an event here, there's tables, chairs, yeah, that was really.
So the biggest thing you might have is a party rental truck.
Something else, Briggs?
I'm trying to imagine without the parking on the south side. Wouldn't that really dissuade people from? Because, okay, they can park across on the east side of Craycroft. But if there was a cafe there, without parking, it seems like it would be a kind of a tough business.
There's a real other factors.
I mean, I'm not suggesting any change, I'm just sort of an observation, I guess, without the parking.
Well, I mean, I think we looked at XO down in the barrio, and they have a pretty limited parking themselves. They do have, I think they have like 5 or 10 spots next to the building, but compared, I think those spots are also utilized by everyone in that community, so they park up the streets, unfortunately.
Well, that's what would happen.
Well, I think that's sort of the intent of the design, is to eliminate people from parking along that section.
But I'm saying if that south parking lot is not part of this design scope, I mean, if it's gonna be developed later, well, it won't be there, right? Presumably when.
It's likely to get built.
Oh, it is? Oh,
Yeah.
oh,
I was just saying, technically, it's not, we don't have a signed contract to build that.
I agree.
We did proposals.
I would be.
but we haven't got it.
How many parking spaces presently, or present?
9,
9 goes to 34, is that what you said?
37.
1, 2,
So there's 9 now.
5, 6.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It looks like 6 plus 2 ADA parking spaces, right?
Do we need 37?
Well, if there was a wedding, I think was the design intent.
How many is in the overflow for the special event parking that's just going north?
I'm
Oh.
Are you glad
In-
you're here to have a vote?
In this drawing, it looks like 12, but
I think there's 6 right now.
yeah, 6 right now.
And then the other challenge is that we have a huge amount of parking in Fort Lowell Park. We have a pedestrian hawk crossing. That's the good news. The bad news is, once you get to the west side of that hawk crossing, there's no sidewalk, there's no way to get. You can see the pinch point at that corner where the merge lane is pretty severe. So that's, again, not part of our scope, but it would be awfully good if if you could actually get from the west end of the Hawk Crossing in an accessible sidewalk all the way around to this,
Yeah, especially if you have to walk there after a wedding.
right?
After.
Well, after, not before, yeah.
So if we go back and look at the parking on the south side and you eliminate any of, I mean, is 37 the magic number? Is there a reason for, do you have to have so much parking for so much space, or is there a rule or regulation? Like with 30 spaces, like,
It's a lot of parking.
well, I think, I mean, 37 seems like a lot. That's,
What do you guys do here?
I was trying to, I don't know what the number is here, but it's not.
Probably not 37.
I mean, there is a
But
code,
we have
there is a
overflow
code
across the
formula
street.
for the number of spaces, the function of the square foot of the commercial space. We're sort of not following the code rules at this point. It's part of Fort Lowell Park, so I think we're kind of not constrained by that. The commercial is not standalone commercial. It's ancillary to the park activity, and if it were standalone commercial, it wouldn't meet the current R1 zoning, so it has to be ancillary to the park, and therefore we get to count all the parking in the park. We're just doing what seems reasonable without disturbing the footprint of the fort, the archaeology of the fort, or the footprint of the buildings that define the western edge of the parade ground.
But without accommodating people who are driving in the park in some other easy way for them to get across the street, they'll end up parking on Fort Lowell.
Yeah.
They'll just park in front.
I
Yeah.
don't disagree.
Yeah, so that's why there's a way to somehow accommodate the already disturbed areas directly across from the commissary. I think it makes more sense.
Is there, and I know this isn't necessarily part of the review, but just, I guess, just another observation, given our experience with in the neighborhood with receptions and that sort of thing and adjacent private properties, I mean, is that a concern with having a relatively large event in the compound there that goes into the night, presumably?
it stops at 10.
I mean, it's a park facility. There will be a lease to whoever leases the property, and that language relative to times of events could be in the content of that lease.
And that's what.
Certainly
it is
not
here.
something architects would be.
Yeah, that's what it is here. They have to be cleared out
Right.
and cleaned up and turned off by 10.
I'm sure it'll
So
be something
the
very
events,
similar.
there's usually language in the contract that says you can't be here after 9, right?
And would we have any role in that?
The historic district, the neighborhood association does. Mhm.
Grace has her hand up, just, and, Jasmine Chan was on briefly. It looks like she's not on anymore, but she's the administrator for City of Tucson Parks and Recreation. So you could ask her about some of those things. What role would the neighborhood association have in developing those operating agreements? RFP, et cetera?
And I suspect she's currently working on that request for proposal, so now's the right time to do that.
Okay. At the bottom here, it says the parking plan is 15 spaces
Oh.
plus for ADA.
I fixed that.
And,
She caught that earlier today and I fixed that.
But.
I don't know what happened.
So if we, I mean, my recommendation would be to really, I like your idea of maybe some spaces come in off, because I don't know that Cottonwood Lane that goes north and south, because Cottonwood Lane goes east to west.
But there was a portion of it
That did turn.
that was single tree, not an LA, not two trees, but a single line of trees that went north.
Ah.
Just exactly in the footprint of those
Mhm.
circles with the lines through.
And is there a plan to revegetate those trees
Not in this scope of work.
There
We
was
would
one
like to
in
do
the
that.
master plan.
in the master?
In the
plan?
master plan,
Yeah.
and also to revegetate the LA that runs in front of the officers' quarters. Which incidentally doesn't match up with the one on the east side.
No, it
Big
does.
signage.
It's-
Yes, Bricks are handled.
Bricks.
We don't hear you.
You're muted.
Oh, she's moving.
Excuse me, thank you. Just thinking a little bit more parking and pedestrians and like the required signage to create that safety. I don't know if this is drifting out of scope as well, but whether there's a consideration to have a median that does the brush breakout again to, I think those have been very successful in bringing, especially as they've grown out further west on Fort Lowell, but just thinking about people coming in off of the Craycroft corridor and having a pedestrian crossing and what kind of signage is going to be coming into this project to communicate safety for pedestrians and or communicate to cars to slow down in a different way through vegetation or more another island or something.
Well, that seems to be a coordination issue. As you probably know, the street people are different than the land people and they would have to be coordination with signage with the work. You've all been working with mobility and transportation for a
yeah,
while. And,
yeah.
that
But they
would
didn't
have
want
to
to
be,
touch the park.
that would have to be coordinated with our work,
Yeah.
but not part of our scope.
Thank you for that
But
clarification.
I agree with what you're saying, Grace. We need to send a message to slow down, and with clear signage, not just for the neighborhood, but for the project as well.
I really like this speed table. I'm wondering, as we look at this, like at the very bottom of the parking lot, so that's the farthest south, there's 2 trees, and are there like 4 spots that are kind of,
Those are the ADA spots.
those are the ADA spots. So they're the farthest from where the people want to go. Is that the,
This is true, but this is kind of a proposed, this hasn't been flushed out at all.
okay. Because I wonder if that space itself
Slides,
slides north, we lose 4 spots, but we need those ADA spots. I recognize that. I'm not trying to get rid of those, but to just kind of shorten it. 33 instead of 37. And what, as you put that in, one of the other big concerns has been, what are the barriers that are gonna go around this parking so people don't park? I mean, and that's what we had.
Everywhere,
And that's the first time we opened it. We had people parking everywhere. They went through and over
I
barriers
think
and.
we're planning on using railroad ties.
Very similar to the parking lot you have.
So this way we're not disturbing the soil, and then railroad ties would probably act as the parking stops too. Maybe we use concrete parking stops because they just sit in the ground, but.
Elaine, could I go back to see if I'm understanding? Are you suggesting that we have sort of back of curb parking along the north edge of the Atkins property? On the street,
What do you mean by backup curve?
behind the roadway, along here? Should we look to see if we can create some parallel parking along there? And people use it right now that way.
That's
People
gotta
use
be-
it On the dirt, right
Yeah.
now, but
But
there
that's
is
your
a,
walkway
it's
too.
on a walkway.
Well, that's my question. Should we look at a way to accommodate both, or is that just? Because right now people
On the
park
street
there all the
side,
time.
you're talking about.
Yeah.
On the street side, no, I'd suggest it on the other side. That if the paths are delineated as walking paths, then the parking be on this side of the fence, assuming the fence is staying.
Okay, so you're suggesting parallel parking, or,
Well, yeah, or somehow clustered in different ways than just
I mean, what they won't let us do is back cars out onto Fort Lowell.
right there.
And taking enough room to maneuver and drive out, it's gonna take up a whole lot of land to do that. It'll take 42 feet at a minimum.
Or
right?
using the second gate, maybe using the second gate to go in one gate now. the
Well,
other
we
gate
can look
or
at that,
something
and
like
that's, you had said that before, and we haven't really explored that yet, although we're intending to.
Yeah.
I like that concept, Elaine, of a loop parking, maybe, you exit out onto Craycroft or however that is.
Would you go to the, would you go to the landscape? I think the landscape was pretty well accepted, right? I mean, those concepts. and all
This
that.
concept,
The-
Next one.
yeah. I think the DG paths are a great idea.
and I was trying, is there a place I can go see those paper? The papers in use and.
Yeah, there's a couple of installations on the U of A campus, and I could tell you exactly where to look for them, so you can see them.
Yeah, because it looked very formal, very squared and formal and the rest of it isn't.
I think it's
But
also how you finish those edges, because the idea is with those patios, and then they'd be surrounded by vegetation, kind of that green strip on the side, so like blending them in with some boulders and some vegetation, so it takes off that hard edge.
But I thought that was great. I loved the new tree that would be on the east side. I thought that was really cool. And you're just gonna maintain the current adobe wall that goes out.
Stabilized, yeah.
That one, yeah.
Right now, that's not in the scope, but there's been some suggestion to sort of develop it. And we'll see,
What happens then, when you get there.
Scott, can I put you on the spot and ask a question? If we were to explore some kind of a more modest driveway to service this, here's a bump of what looks like adobe melt right around that spot. Do you know anything about that?
Now, I don't know if you can show the plan view where you can see things on either side of Lowell Road. I kind of forget what the line of buildings was.
There's,
Yeah, I don't know if it was necessarily a fort building, but it may be an early post-fort.
I mean, there's a mound there and that always
Yeah.
tells me, I mean,
That's
it's not a
not an
natural.
Adobe, yeah,
That once was adobe there and it's just all turned to mud.
yeah.
But I'm just wondering if that's a impediment to putting a driveway there. I'm asking Scott because he's an archaeologist.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a question of what it would cost to mitigate it. In other words, to excavate it, if you needed to remove it to do the driveway. But you could, yeah, I mean, especially if it was a post-fort Adobe building. I mean, it may still be historically significant, associated with, use of the fort.
And we don't know what's under there. There might be a stone foundation.
There may
Who
be,
knows what?
right. There probably is, and there may be other features associated with it, like, privy pits or trash pits or so on. If it was just a driveway, you might not have to go too deep. So that would be less of a concern for buried features.
Yeah, you
But if
probably
there's a
have,
mound there, it's
you probably have to
probably,
run Bobcat through it to level it out.
yeah.
And Corky, I wasn't at the meeting that this was discussed, but what is the benefit of clearing the vegetation and putting a new access way in where you're talking about, as opposed to using the existing driveway and then backing in?
Well, the existing driveway is on city of Tucson property, but it's a private easement to the property back there. So all of a sudden, a road that is only currently used by the people who live back in that complex is now.
Oh, it's a
being-
private easement?
Well, it's not an exclusive easement. It still sits on the city of Tucson property,
Right.
but. the
Our
user of that
property
driveway-
our property is landlocked. It's the house that's in the corner of the commissary.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah, that's what I was explaining, Rick.
yeah, it doesn't have any frontage on the street, so it has this historic easement running out to Fort Lowell across the commissary property. And the other people who use it is the Fort Lowell Neighborhood Association to access the historic Bolsius tool shed where we do storage.
Which is also on park. property.
And so is the concern just that even though it is on city property, there's not a desire to have a once a day van pull up onto that west side?
It currently functions as a private driveway for our house, and we've come into agreement with the neighborhood using this driveway to access the shed.
It's a narrow road.
I believe that the easement it's granted to our property at 5495 East Fort Lowell, the one that's landlocked behind the commissary in the cutout corner.
So then I guess the other option is using an area that's already cleared to the south side of the commissary.
Or looking at how those 20-minute parking spots can also service as a service spot could be a possibility. I know that if there's 20-minute parking, people who are getting lattes are going to use them if there's a cafe there. But if one of them I know if an event is coming in the evening, you can easily put up a sign that says don't park here now because there's going to be a truck coming at a certain time, potentially. I'm not sure quite how that would work out, but it does seem like a huge amount of impact for one daily delivery to the land site.
There's also a wellhead there that might be in the way. I mean, not to argue with you, but that's exactly the same landscape that we're taking out at the south end of the parking.
Total, yeah.
Move forward.
Move forward. Can we talk about the salary of it?
Yeah, that'd be great. It'd be fun to get it. We are currently thinking of this as an additive alternate, meaning we're gonna draw it, and we're gonna see what it costs, but we may or may not be able to afford it.
That's where this second idea comes in. Cause something has to be done. I mean, it's one of the three.
Yeah, I mean, there's lateral soil pressure behind here, and eventually these walls will fall in. Maybe not now, maybe not later, but there's no vertical steel, there's no resistance to lateral forces. And when it gets water soaked back behind that wall, that produces lateral pressure. So we need either to put a 6-foot chain link fence around it so that no one falls in, and if it collapses, no one gets hurt. Or put essentially a giant brace inside of it to keep that from happening, keep those walls from collapsing.
So do you consider the metal flooring the brace? Or is that
It's on
heavy?
a steel structure.
So this becomes the brace that you're talking about, okay?
And
It's not in addition to.
And it doesn't bear on the wall at all. It sits on columns and pushes up against the wall.
I really liked this. I like being able to, the steel grate, whether it's, tan or more silvered. I thought it just looked like so much fun.
We've kind of explored ideas of maybe a different surface, whether it's wood planking or, but what we really wanted to do was
Like your dad.
bring lights in, bring light in,
So
yeah.
you could see through, and I just thought that.
And look down in the hole. The magic is that it needs to be 30 inches or less from the top. I call it the junior high multipurpose rule, which is if you have a stage that's less than 30 inches, you don't need a railing to it. And so that would be our goal, is to make it so that if someone tumbled into it, it's not far enough so that you would get hurt.
Okay.
And it turns out to be structurally a really good location to reinforce that wall.
Courtney, I had a quick question for the interior. Say you went with this, you would have to remove melted adobe and whatever else was inside to a certain level, and would you remove it down to the base of the walls?
We would do caissons. So we would do a drilled hole with concrete holding up steel posts.
Okay.
So they would
be away from the wall.
And they'd be away from the wall. We wouldn't be touching the dirt.
Right, yeah, I probably wasn't clear, but I meant, right now, you don't have the full depth of the wall exposed everywhere within the interior, right?
Correct.
You have dirt basically piled up on the sides.
Right.
Would you remove that so you can expose the full wall to the base of all the walls?
Probably not. I mean,
Okay.
I'd be, then we'd have to have you watching the whole.
Well, that was my next point. If you did remove that, it might be an issue.
I mean, our thought would be simply to do drill files at the appropriate location.
Much less to monitor archaeology.
Yeah, and you watching what comes out of the hole when we do it.
Yeah,
That seems like the least impact.
yeah.
And it seems unlikely that there's any, well, I shouldn't say that. Unlikely, there's a lot of significant archaeology on the bottom of the basement floor, but
Yeah, I don't know how deep things go
We
there.
still don't know if it's stone down there either.
what do you mean on the floor of it?
Yeah, if it had,
No, what the floor was
if they
made
put
of, right?
rock on them.
Find out the first time we try to drill.
Yeah.
Right.
And we do soils studies right away. I mean, to look at exactly what the soil, because in order to design those footings for the steel, we need to have a geotech investigation of the ground, and that would tell us a lot about what's under there. We get core samples probably in 5 or 6 places.
Mhm.
I only had one other comment about the commissary, and that was, I'm glad to see the mini splits go away.
Glad to see one.
The mini splits be replaced by something else.
Yeah, when we worked with the mechanical engineer, he kind of pointed out that a mini split's life expectancy is about 10 years. And there's no really replacing the parts, it's just replacing the whole piece.
And that's what we have here in this, the 2 buildings here, we have to replace them. They don't work, they leak, they're just.
So can you explain what you're gonna use? Because I'm not.
We're gonna use your standard interior, like residential air conditioning units, so the ones you would find where the air handler is inside the house. Or maybe in the garage. In the
It's a
little door.
split system, but not a mini split. So there's a condensing unit outside and a fan coil in a closet inside.
And you'll have a grate or something, you have to have ductwork or?
Some of them already have some soffits with ductwork, but kind of
Okay.
where we strategically place them, we'll be able to just have sort of a centralized duct at the top that would blow into those rooms. And that was, our goal was just to have the least amount of impact in there. Yeah, so you can see just an example. This one, we have the larger unit here. We're gonna have sort of a closeted unit in the north corner, and then we'll have a unit here in the bathroom. So in this bathroom, we can reach these 2 rooms as well as this room. And then the main room will have to have something on its own so that we don't have exposed ductwork.
Any questions about the ADA bathroom added it there in the, what you call it, the pink, the light pink? It was light pink. That's what it was.
I think it's a great name.
It is catchy.
Because I don't think that was original. If you look here, it would have been right there. And I'm not sure if that's a wood structure, or if that's actually.
It was pretty common when you had Adobe buildings, the bathroom was an outhouse. And then when it connected to the sewer, they built an addition to that, and they typically put the kitchen and the bathroom together in that. You can go all around Barrio and El Presidio, and you'll see that over and over again, buildings that had a certain shape when they were built, and all of a sudden there's a lean-to bathroom, kitchen in the back of it.
Yeah, I was trying to show here these 2 photos. You can see it's the same facade. And, he clearly extended this wall that's over here in some way. And a lot of the photos, I couldn't even tell which part of the building they were, because I think a lot of the walls had fallen down.
Yeah, I don't have any questions. I thought they were great.
So we'll start with the Donaldson House. Donaldson House is on the northwest corner of the park. And it's accessible. I think that's also Fort Lowell, kind of jumps.
Yeah.
It's Fort Lowell. Well,
It's,
it is, but I think
it's private.
it's all private, yeah. A large chunk of it is on 2 pieces of the city's land. And so there it is, and this has the corral, so this ramada on the back is partially protecting what's left of the corral. And part of our plan for this is to do sort of a plaster cap over what's existing and, you know, repair the basal coping where the water has sort of damaged it. And there's a little house, and you'll see in some of the historic photos, it maybe was a part of the corral. I call it the chicken coop, but it looked like they had it turned it into a casita when it was the Donaldson property. Then it does have an existing parking lot. I think with 10 parking spaces, it can fit 1 ADA. And I think somewhere in the 80s, it was redone by an architect named Earl Kai Chan, and it became like the Children's Museum. And we saw what Scott found some information. We saw it advertised as like the Human and Health Science Museum or something.
Yeah, it was, they had like models of the human body and things in there for kids to view. Yeah. And then it eventually was incorporated in the Children's Museum downtown when that kind of came in use. To Discovery Center or something like that.
Okay, so from a landscape perspective, our goals are modest. We realize, and what we're looking here at the on the right, it's just an image of currently the pathway that runs along Craycroft. Concrete pathway with interpretive signage kind of ends right at the entrance to Donaldson, which gives it a prominence in that point. But the programming right now looks like that will be, the Donaldson will be office space, potentially for a future site operator. So it won't really be something that will be on that interpretive trail at this time. So what we, you know, our goals for the landscape, we want to provide a comfortable space for the people that are going to be working in that building. And we don't want to do anything that would hinder a, you know, more full-blown landscape update at a future time.
Well, there's a wall that's down on Craycroft.
We're gonna fix that.
That would be, I mean,
Yeah,
that would be really nice.
She'll explain to you
yeah.
why that fell.
So one of the main things that's happening with Donaldson is a lot of water flowing towards that site. A lot of water runs from the park site and goes across the little street and goes through, and that kind of rips through the parking lot and then exits onto Craycroft Road.
It also gets stuck right there.
Yes, it gets stuck right there. And then a lot of site flow where you kind of see the grayish boomerang berms on the east side. A lot of site flow is coming from there and going right into the back of the Donaldson house. And so there's been a bunch of collapse, a bunch of water damage issues. So one of the things that this project that we're looking at is, you know, how do we control that? Unfortunately, most of that is outside of our scope. And so we're going to, for like water that's coming across at Fort Lowell Park, the goal will be basically to prevent that from entering the parking lot. That might be done with a berm. PNM has contracted with a civil firm just to look at what is the amount of offsite flows coming, and that's still in the works, but that's something that's kind of at the top of our agenda from a landscape side, is to make sure that we get the water going away from the building. That parking lot will stay like it is. We are going to, you know, preserve and reuse some of the brick that's there. And we'll, yeah, go ahead and go to the next slide. Take a look at that. So the front of house, those images on the right, photos from 1977, looking at that front entry. And on the left is the plan view, and where that purple tree symbol is, that would be a new tree. That is one place that we're looking at moving away from the mesquite tree. So the purple is symbolizing a desert willow. Typically, we would stay with the same species, but those mesquite roots are really intrusive. It's a very small area, and we're concerned just about stability of the building in there. The other thing that we're looking at in that front entry is right now there are 2 downspouts on the east side and 1 downspout on the west side. Those 2 roof areas flow into that center area, and it's hard to get water out of there. So we're either looking at potentially The architect may be able to change the drainage pattern of that roof. Otherwise, we'll make sure that we lightly grade to get the water out of that front entry and then going to the west. In terms of what the planting looks at the front of the house, we are using those photos on the right. For some revegetation, the budget for Donaldson is really small for the landscape. So for the most part, we're addressing drainage, preserving the existing trees that are out there, potentially adding like one tree, which is the green symbol in the front, but then really just taking care of water and what you're seeing at the bottom of the screen on the left with the little basin shapes is collecting water that is coming from the parking lot and from the south, very minor amounts, and just conveying them so they don't continue going towards the house. We do understand, the issue with any kind of excavation on site. So this is looking at, just an 8-inch kind of minimal excavation and, realize what's required with that, but it is to address those issues. And then just a couple shots of the front of the house. So on the left, where the brick walkway is, that brick would be replaced, with concrete, and then the patio that's in between that front courtyard rebuilt. But that gives us an opportunity to get drainage going basically under that brick, which will be replaced, and flowing to the west and going around. And on the right, you can just see that downspout coming down. There were 3 of those emptying into that space. The picture on the top right I have there just because there is this beautiful gate and walkway, and I think at one time the master plan there was kind of some programming for that. Our idea is we're not doing anything with that in the space beyond. That could be part of a future effort that's done.
Oh, I think I've done it.
There you go. And then back of house. So Drew will talk about, kind of some of the removals building wise on back of house, but we're looking at the area on the right that is sketched in gray with the 3 tables. That would be new brick patio space. Some of that is under cover. We are using the historical photos and previous work that PMM has done of kind of outlining the hardscape that was there. The area on the left, the semicircular, and then the walkway coming around on the west, that again is looking at what was there historically. The brick that is there now would be taken up. We would salvage that. The grading needs to be adjusted so that, again, we can get water to flow away from the building instead of sitting on the north side and ponding into it. But the idea would be of salvaging that brick and reusing it and then keeping in that footprint. The area on the right, which is highlighted, so that's what Drew referred to as the chicken coop, which is really nice. And then later, turned into a casita or something like that. But there was, from the photos, a brick walkway, and the square on the top right is kind of highlighting that area. There's a lot of issues today with that brick, a lot of drainage issues in that area. And so our plan with that is what is there would be taken up, and we'd kind of like to ghost in that former brick patio, just using decomposed granite or screen rock. So that area could be used as a patio space, could be used to go to that building, but not having the expense or the formality of putting that brick back in. And then these are some pictures of back of house, the photos at top from 77, and then what's there today. And if you're looking at the top right, you can see that tree and a cutout space, and then down below what that is like currently. And one thing that we are not suggesting as we're putting the brick back in is doing those cutouts and the tree placement close to the house, because it does just lead to root intrusion and issues with water. So the plan would be, that tree gets removed, which has died on bottom right, and then the brick would just be covered in there. On bottom left, that's a planting area right next to the north side of the house. And again, as we move forward, we wouldn't do those planting areas right against the house. The brick would continue up to the house. There are some things that were kind of new additions. So when we're looking at the photo at the top left, that's a newer patio that was put in association with the swimming pool that is there. That is in relatively good shape, and so we thought just from a cost perspective, that and the walkway would be left in place. It doesn't need work, and that's something that I could see as a nice kind of breakout space for office staff to be able to enjoy. There's a lot of plants that have grown in just to the north of the house, and our idea with that is just selective thinning. So some of that vegetation would be thinned out, and then we would allow some of the plants that are there to have room to grow and fill in. We're not proposing any new planting or any irrigation system on the north side of the house, so just selective pruning. There's some beautiful mesquites that, one of them is dead and one of them is dying, and then that picture on the right. We would suggest that those be retained on site, evaluated by an arborist for stability, but left because those trees do have a lot of value, even as they're dying from an ecological standpoint.
Okay, so this is the current existing plan of the building. I don't know how familiar everyone is to this building, so I kind of included a little bit more. We kind of guessed that this section may have been associated with the fort. We're not too clear, but you can tell that it feels like sort of this was the original building. These two pieces were put on later on, which are both adobe. And then everything kind of going around here is newer. And I think what happened was this got added on, and then this was originally a porch that got enclosed at some point. And this is a small porch on the north, and it does show up in those 1977 photos, but it's just wood framed and it has rotted away. So we're proposing to clear out as much space into this building. And I'll show you, well, here we go. We'll look at some of these. So this is a historic photo. This would be the front face of the building, and it had a porch that's been enclosed. And we plan on opening that back up and sort of restoring this whole corner. Keep in mind that adobe wall that runs along Craycroft kind of wraps around and terminates right here. So one thing we haven't really addressed in this drawing set is we're going to need to create some sort of fencing or something to prevent people from sleeping on that patio or finding their way into there.
Yeah.
And again, just some really nice photos.
Those great windows. So look at those windows when you.
And all those windows are still there.
This is so nice.
All the
to see
windows are
these
still.
For our other buildings that we're concerned about.
So here's our proposal. And what we're proposing is, again, we would open up this porch that's on the southwest corner. But one of the bigger moves that we'd like to do is remove this block wall that runs around here, which was originally a patio, and then to open this patio back up and activate it. Because it's a very low ceiling and it's really dark and it doesn't have a good feeling in it.
It also is about a 4-inch step down from those double doors. So from a ADA point of view, it's a real problem.
And so you would build up.
Yeah, we could build up the patio so it was flush and drained away from the building.
And then this room and what we're calling the conference room are the two lower spaces, and this previous kitchen would get, the floor would be raised up to match the floor inside the whole building, create a ramp into the conference room. Again, we would just kind of clear out all the wood framed walls and just leave everything that's block. And we would put an ADA restroom in this corner with some storage, and I think this is where our HVAC is going to end up too. We're sort of figuring that out. And then create offices. And then this is just sort of so you have an idea of what's going on in there. Currently, there's shearing walls going throughout the space in multiple places because the roof is failing. So we have a bit of work to. We're gonna have to probably replace. I know for sure this section of the roof, and this one has been replaced, but it's not quite done correctly. So I think they can repair how it is. And then this one, it looks like we can also repair it. And then just, we were pushing towards renderings, but they didn't get too far. So you have an idea of what the porch looked like and sort of the new porch on the back.
You just do an Arizona room, screen porch.
And then that's everything, so just kind of open up to you guys.
Just as a rule of thumb, always useful to keep in mind is those Torrance windows, those steel sash windows, casement windows came to Tucson in the early 1930s. So if you see steel casement windows in the building, you know it's from about 1931 on. They didn't exist prior to that. It's always a good way to date the age of a building.
The only, these were the only single hung windows that we know of.
And that building.
Yeah, I mean, based on these photos, so you can see them
Yeah.
there. And I think it shows, there's one on this other wall, there it is.
And do you guess that those are older?
Yeah, that's why,
Older.
that's why I was suspecting that this section of the building might have been sort of the original structure. And then, you know, in a natural Adobe way, they just added a room on.
So one of those offices you have to reserve for us, because we need an archive of historic districts.
Which one?
Somewhere.
Somewhere, yeah.
Yeah,
Somewhere.
one of those two south offices.
Create a library. We have people who are trying to donate books to us, right? Have their own historic libraries, basically. We have no place to put them. So to my second bedroom, which is getting really bad.
So it's likely that this building will be included with the commissary in their request for proposals from an operator. I don't think the city's got a stomach for individual leases with individual folks. It'll probably be kind of a master lease. There might be some sublessors, but lessees, excuse me.
And I know the museum has interest in this too.
Yep.
For storage.
Or for storage.
Yeah. Because
Not
they don't have
for
enough
use.
room. Well, they would use it more for administration and storage. Then they'd open the kitchen at the museum again.
Yeah, I think they
Now
want to have
storage.
events. Yeah,
Yeah,
I see.
that's everything.
I like the porches. I like that concept of taking it back to the porches and opening it up. So what do you need from us for, I mean, did you
Well,
get feedback? You feel like-
Yeah, no, and I think this, I mean, you know, as we go through the process, things are gonna change, like this bathroom may have to be reconfigured in this space, you know, and it may end up in this corner because we're having some conflict with the toilet, the grab bars and placement with the windows and, you know, those sort of things, but this is the general concept of where we're heading. And we want to let you guys be aware of that so that when we come back during, you know, a more refined phase, there's nothing really new, or we'll be able to quickly identify what's new in the group.
So do you need any kind of written recommendation?
Do you need any kind of approval?
I don't think, no, this was just courtesy for you guys to see where we're going, how we're heading. I mean, Elaine's seen it, but I don't think anybody else in the room has been to any of our user group meetings, so this is an opportunity to show the board.
The other thing that we did not say is that this is city property and city bond funds, but it is being operated and managed by Pima County. The city and Pima County have an IGA saying, we need your help to manage the design and construction of these historic buildings on our property. Is that accurate, Scott?
Yeah, and I don't know if Sarah's still on the line, but
She is.
she could speak to that better than I could.
I am.
Hi, Sarah.
Hello. I think this has been a great conversation. I am very excited. I love all the comments about the parking, because I kind of was going that way too. And yeah, I think we're going to make a really successful project.
Great.
Great, and I think you're not changing any of the material, the adobe will be the same, the
Absolutely.
adobe stucco, the stucco-y look
Absolutely.
and all that, and.
Well, if you notice, all the stucco is falling off.
Yeah.
The west side of that,
Showed me.
the west side of that, the west side of that courtyard actually is just all gone.
Yeah,
The east side's not because it's concrete block. So.
yeah, and honestly, I'm less concerned about the interior. I mean, than I am
Well,
the
that's all just
exterior,
being
but yeah, I appreciate
transparent
that.
to you guys, yeah.
Yeah, no, I appreciate
It
it.
was public facilities, so. you wanna
You might be there for an event.
be honest.
And I haven't been inside that since it was a children's facility, so I don't remember the
Absolutely
ceiling, I
don't
don't
want to go into it
remember.
right now.
Yeah,
So nasty.
It's so nasty.
it is bad. I had to leave.
And one of the Donaldson family members in the last probably 3 or 4 years came and asked us about why we're not taking care of their home. And it was really a difficult conversation, but of course I threw back to the city. But it was,
Now you have a good answer.
I
yeah,
also have
Yeah, we
a
have a
note
good answer now.
from, John, it's like an account from John Dawson about buying the property and building on
Can
it.
you share that with us?
Yeah, I will. I was trying
Please.
to remember if there are any details about how it was built, but.
Scott, do you have that or not?
I don't,
Yeah.
I'd love to see it.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Scott is our perennial researcher. We just get emails from Scott all the time. I found these really cool photos. I found these
Yeah.
newspaper
No,
articles.
no, we hear one thing and then we tell him and then he finds it all and spills it.
he finds,
He goes down the
Fun to
rabbit hole.
do,
and
but
comes
yeah,
back.
not always successful. I like to try.
Very.
because look at the French doors. Yeah.
Well, there were, that was just an opening, and I mean, I'm sure it was some sort of doors
Oh,
original.
was it?
Yeah, and actually, when you go in there, this section here is really low. I think this was a patio at some point.
Yeah,
Like it's like 7 feet right here at the edge and. The doorway is 6'3", so.
Okay. Great. Anybody, anything else? Anything? Anything?
No, really good presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Great.
great presentation. Thank you.
Leave now.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Fred.
And great comments. So we'll keep it
We
going
are-
forward.
Anybody have anything else?
There was one more item
Oh.
we had on the agenda, which was to discuss design guidelines and the process to update design guidelines. This is,
Can we leave it? Can we not do anything?
I make a motion that we move that item to our next meeting.
okay, thank
Okay.
you.
I
It's known as
Sounds
the
good.
8 o'clock.
And anybody
Guys are awesome.
opposed? You seconded? Okay, yes. David?
Yes, yes.
Good, thank you.
I'm in favor. Yes, okay.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Easier, be easier on the board.
And so we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Mary Lou. Great work. Good job.
Thanks, Briggs. I'm so glad. I can't believe you participate from vacation.
Yes, thank you. Good job running the meeting.
We appreciate it so much. Danny,
Yeah.
you need to attend 2 meetings, but you also